Welcome to the latest episode of the Real Talks with SOSAD Ireland Wellbeing series. My name is Alan O'Mara. I'm the founder of Real Talks, a former Cavan GAA player, an author, and a performance and wellbeing coach with sports and business leaders around the world. This episode is the second part of my conversation with David Balfe, also known as For Those I Love. In this episode, David discussed how he struggled with grief and depression. He talks about the importance of therapy and reaching out for professional supports. He talks about the power of love, friendship and creativity as he worked on his sense of self-worth during dark periods. He talks about creating the award-winning album, the self-titled For Those I Love, and what it is like to perform emotional songs linked to complex parts of his past. To get all previous episodes, check out the Real Talks with SOSAD Ireland Wellbeing Hub at sosadireland.ie/Real Talks, or search for Real Talks on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Before we get started, I just wanted to tell you that SOSAD Ireland is here to support you and your mental health. SOSAD Ireland provides support and services free of charge to people who are struggling with suicidal ideation, self-harming, bereavement, depression, stress, anxiety, or if you simply need to talk. Please go to sosadireland.ie to learn more about services like counselling, crisis support, a 24/7 helpline and text messaging supports. If you are in a crisis situation and need urgent help, please call 1-800-901-909 now. That's 1-800-901-909 now. Thanks for listening. It sounds like those first couple of sessions, you said I think it was 6 with the college, were free and it was paid for. And in a sense, that almost just like releases the pressure valve to kind of bring it down a couple of notches. But then what's the kind of follow-on period like that for you in terms of like trying to dig into that next layer of who you are, what you're about, and trying to get through that kind of fog that's around you?
Fog's a great term to use, because that's something that I've ran into. That exact feeling is something that I've ran into many times in my life since then. Like there's sludge under your feet and there's fog all around because you can't see where you're going. You can't see what's coming towards you. I struggled after those 6 sessions because I did those 6 sessions and I felt great for a time, but other things started to pop up and I didn't have access then to anything. I wasn't able to get access to anything. Couldn't afford treatment. I couldn't afford to see a therapist. I couldn't afford to, even if it was something simple like medication, which is a different thing and something that I've had, personally, I've had very positive experiences with. I was great for a time being after that, and the panic was not something that I dealt with. But when that just overall fog creeps back in again and that weight of depression creeps in, I was lost again, and I didn't know what to do then because I didn't have that kind of access. I was very, very blessed that I had my friends as a support system, and one of the things that I got to share with my friends, and I do think is very important in my life, and I'm very aware of how impactful it has been, is that layer of creativity. I don't know if I would have been able to undo or work through any of the difficulties or any of the issues haunting my life if I didn't have creativity as a way to work through that, as a driving force, maybe in some ways as an inspiration, but in a much more real way as a space to sort of self-interrogate. And I'm really lucky that my friends also felt the same way and that we were able to connect based on, in some ways, shared experience, in some ways, common experience, and in some ways, just empathy towards each other experience and funnel that into something that was creative and greater than the sum of the parts that led to its creation in the first place, greater than the difficulties, greater than the pain, greater than the horror of some of the stuff that you look back on and try and deal with, and really gave us a very trusting place to grow and develop together. I know that that's in many ways a rare experience. I know that it's something that I'm so lucky to have had. It's very much a double-sided sword for me, I think, because in one sense it is that creativity, that shared creativity is the thing that brought me closer to the people that I loved. It's something that brought me, made me far more connected in a very, very deep way with my friends than anything else had. But yeah, it can be very difficult to deal with and contend with as well, particularly when you're looking back on the stuff that you created with friends, and then you realize maybe the pain that was going into some of that, and you realize the pain that your friends were dealing with at the time that maybe you were oblivious to in some ways. Maybe you weren't capable of dealing with it. Maybe you weren't able to see it. Maybe it didn't occur to you as alarming because you were also going through the same pain, but people deal with that pain differently. So in some ways, when I look back at that creativity and the fruits of that creativity, it can be very painful because I see in it so much of what haunted my friends and people that I care about, people that I feel protective about. But yeah, I think the creativity gave me a way out for a long time. I think that's not something that's it's not something that's unique just to like the arts or something either. Like I see people do the same thing with sports, with football, with boxing.
Yeah, because it's ultimately a positive escapism of depending on what it is you're interested in or what brings you flow or where you find a way to express yourself or to kind of almost like take stuff out of your head and put it down, if it's on paper, on a screen, if it's through physical activity. That's kind of what you're getting at, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because look, there's so many things. So much of that question around self-worth is that you have nothing to give. You know, that you have nothing to show for yourself. Who am I as a person? What contribution do I make to this world? With creativity, with sport, whether it's football, boxing, whether it's just lifting weights, whatever it is, there is like an end result to show. It makes you feel proud of a thing that you have done. There's an accomplishment there. There's something that you can share with other people. And it's something that you can firmly see the results of and realize that, you're not what you're telling yourself that you are. You can use that as a very much as a funnel. Yeah. But yeah, so I know you asked whatever it was, the two questions back, like where I ended up then and how I dealt with that. Like that's where I was. I was doing that as a coping mechanism. I was working, I was trying to funnel everything into this into this output of creativity as a mechanism of survival, I think, and I know many of my peers were doing it too. But I didn't deal with conventional therapy again until after my best friend passed away. And then I think you're faced with a very, you hit something that permanently changes who you are as a person, permanently changes who the people you love and care about are as people. And you face a level of, horror, concern, shame, guilt, fear, unbearable sadness and depression, and overall alienation with the world that isn't there beforehand. And suddenly you need to have that help again. I am lucky that I was in a position at the time to be able to afford to get access to therapy, and later on down the line get access to the right medication through my doctors. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't had access to therapy, because I didn't know how at all to deal with what had happened. And you're still learning. It's like 4 and a bit years ago. You're still learning. And of course, it is very much a never-ending road, but it's a road that gets brighter as you travel down it. It's one that you can see more clearly, and it's one that you understand much more about where it is that you're going in that trajectory. You're not blindly wandering as much.
Yeah, and I think that, like, in terms from the well-being perspective, David, like, I think it's a never-ending journey. Like, we all have day to day, and I feel like obviously when you're in a deep lull or in a deep low surrounded by fog, from listening to you there, like, you're kind of bury yourself into creativity, and that's kind of, it's helping you survive. But then kind of going back in and re-engage with those professional sports kind of give you an opportunity to come up a gear or two in terms of thriving, and then you're trying to find that balance of rather spikes of just highs on days or real lows on days, trying to just navigate that, the middle of the road, and stay there. And if it's okay with you, then just kind of in terms of the tail end of our conversation, like, because you've mentioned the creativity there and you've mentioned Paul's passing. Like, for anyone that doesn't know, Paul, your best friend, like, died by suicide. And I suppose I feel like it's the right way, if you're comfortable now talking about how that event obviously shakes you to your core, to your being. You've touched upon it there, how close you are. Your identity seemed like very interlinked in terms of a me and you against the world almost in some ways, but also just being together every day, or that kind of deep connection. And can you talk to us a little bit about how then that kind of drives you and it helps you create, like, the album For Those I Love? Obviously, it's such a powerful, creative, beautiful piece of work. But I also don't want to sugarcoat it in that. And I know from talking to you and from listening to you, it also comes from a real place of profound pain and grief and yearning for someone who you miss dearly. And maybe just kind of talk to us a little bit about that process of creating the album and how it became what it became.
Yeah. It's complicated, of course, like, it isn't everything. When I look back on it, I think it's framed differently day by day. Yeah, it's weird. I haven't spoken about this in a while because I had done so, you end up having to do all these media days and stuff, and it's not a nice feeling doing them. But I think I begun to understand the importance of sharing this as an experience, because you realize just how horrifically pervasive that experience is, whether it's people dealing with suicidal ideation or people dealing with the consequences of suicide of somebody that they've loved. It's tragically commonplace, and that it breaks my heart in a vast number of ways. But understanding hearing from people about this, hearing from people that there's value and importance in speaking about this is what sort of makes you go, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's deal with this. Because you don't want this stuff to happen again, whether it's to somebody you love or to a stranger. Any impact that can be had is better than not. When like I had been like writing this music, and I had this name, I had this For Those I Love name. I had been writing this collection of songs for my friends and my family as this record of gratitude and thanks for the sacrifices that they had made in their lives for me, my family, very much on a social level, on a financial level, my friends in their empathy and their patience, and even in their financials themselves. So much more. I had gone to a stage in my life where I had really understood how much love there was between myself and my friends, and how grateful I was for that. But not just me, how grateful the rest of my friends were, and I felt it was really important to try and honour that in some way. I had like done things throughout the years where I had like made specific records for friends of mine. Like, this is the Robbie Lyons tape, and I would just make a lot of music that
It was a way for you to express yourself to them, like
it's just gratitude. Like, this is here. This is the sort of music you like. I've made all these from scratch. It is just, I don't have much to offer other than my labor. You know what I mean? And this is how this is my labor. Like, here's the consequence of 50 hours of work or whatever. Just have it. Nobody else ever needs to see this or hear it, but it's yours. But I had been trying to like write this thing to share with my friends, and I'd been playing bits of it for them without ever telling them what it was. I would like read little bits of lyrics to them on nights out, and I would play. I know I've spoken about this so much, but I would burn CDs that would have like a mix of other people's music and then some instrumentals that I'd been making, and I'd slip them all in, and then we'd drive around at night time and I'd play them on the car radio, and if they'd ask what this is or they couldn't Shazam it and they were focused on the song and knew that it was something that I wanted to keep in that vault for them. So I had been writing this thing as this sense of gratitude, as this testament to the love that had been there. And then Paul passed away, and I don't know. I feel like I have a very sincere coldness when I talk about this now, because I'm used to just, it's just something that's just there in your life forever, and you know that people will talk to you about it, and you just need to be able to talk about it. So it's like you emote in your own time, but you know that there's a reality that you just need to face, and you just talk about it. When he passed, you don't know what to do, and I didn't do anything. Your life suddenly becomes like 5 minutes, 3 years, 2 months, all in the space of an hour. Every sense, understanding of time, of distance, your understanding of pain, suffering, everything. It just all disappears into this just void. There's just in this endless void. You don't know. You're living in a world that isn't real in your mind for a while, because you can't face the horror of the reality that awaits you. It's a survival mechanism. I know that now. But I didn't do anything for a long time. And people talked to me about art, and people talked to me about music, and people would talk to me about the work that Paul and I and my other friends had made together. People would remember Paul based on the stuff. Sorry, not based on, but they would actively remember him by revisiting the things that he did, by the work that he made, by the poems that he wrote, by the by the pieces that he wrote, by the songs that he wrote, and they would revisit who he was as a person in many ways, and what they knew about him, what they contributed, what he contributed. You realise it's very much a sliver of a human, you know. You have that like archive of stuff there, but it's in many ways it's everything to me. I place so much value in having those pieces, having been able to hear Paul talk and emote, and being able to relive memory based on video, but in other ways it's not what it was. It's not that. It's not that human
crumbs
experience.
Almost.
It's just crumbs. It's a great way to put it. But I just didn't do anything, and people talked and I taught, and then eventually I don't know what happened, but I was just back staying in my ma's and going out to the shed where I had been writing that music, and life is very much about survival at that point. Not even necessarily about survival of yourself, but survival of all the other people that you care about, because you don't know what's happening. Your world has been turned upside down. You understand and you see the pain that they're in, and you feel it in yourself, but you see it in them, and you don't know what strength they have left. So you spend all day, every day, just checking in. Are you okay? Is everything okay? Do you need things? But you never give yourself that opportunity. Eventually, a year later, 2 years later, you realise that everybody else is doing that as well. All of your friends are doing the exact same things. They're not giving themselves that opportunity. They're all turning to you, to everybody else in the group, making sure, are you okay? Are you safe? Do you have what you need? But then I'd go to the shed, and it would be night time, and I wasn't sleeping a whole lot, and I'd start trying to write this music again. But obviously it's very different, because you're not writing now about this communal shared love that you're experiencing in the moment. You're not writing about what's going to happen. You're not writing about the future that's promised for us. You're writing about the memories that you had. You're writing to preserve memories. You're writing to archive memory. You're writing to take those moments of most value, of most, of most clarity in your mind, and set them in permanent stone so that they stay there forever. They can't be taken back out of that song. They're there. You've written them down. They're printed. They will be there forever. You won't forget them, because you've coloured them in with the sound of that day, with the sonic makeup of that day, with the smell of that day. You talk about it in your words. With the character of the people that were there, you talk about that with your words, and you set all that stuff in stone. And suddenly, this memory of somebody, this memory of a time, becomes endless. It's something that's always there. It's immortal now. And that sense of loss is different. It's not better, but it's different. And I had been using that as a building block, I think, to just slowly break something through, slowly get to midnight, get to 1 a.m. and face it when you're alone, when you're not looking out for everybody else, and just face it for a bit.
It's just you.
Yeah. I did that for as long as I could, and then I couldn't. And then you realize that you need like serious external help here, because you don't know what you're doing. And I think by that stage I'd started doing what I guess many of us in our position do, particularly those who don't have access to or knowledge of a traditional route of care. You start to like self-medicate, and your path to self-care and self-preservation becomes very blurred with a path to self-destruction, because it's a lot easier to make it at times for a very short period before it all spins out of control, to make it from point A to B in the day, when it's all this just blur of intoxication just moving forward. And then you go, I kind of need to do something about this, because other people see it in you. Your friends start to go, listen, man, there's a problem going on here. You're not who you were even a month ago. You're not who you were 6 months ago. Everybody knew why that was happening. I didn't necessarily see it as much of a problem as everybody else pointed it out to be at the time.
Yeah, but you're just trying to cope in the day, in the hour, in the minute, right?
Absolutely, of course you are. Of course you are. I was dealing with things the way that I knew how to deal with things, which was to gloss over it until I couldn't, and then put the bandage on it for when I could, which was to just, get used, and then you can deal with things with this cloud around it, I mean, it's a different type of fog that you're dealing with then. Eventually I just realised I needed to get much more serious help, and I'm, again, so grateful that, all my friends were on high alert, because we hadn't thought enough about this stuff for 26 years of our lives. We were going, that's, we should probably all get therapy and stuff, but it's, we didn't know. We'd all had these real primary experiences with it and never really developed beyond that. We also probably didn't acknowledge the seriousness of the weight we were all carrying around. The very difficult shared memories that we all knew of. I don't think we had ever really come to terms with it. Whether that was this sort of very toxic trait that some of us hold as men, whether it was a masochistic thing, whether it was just self-preservation, whether it was cowardice. I think maybe it's probably all of those things. But then, I am maybe fairly pragmatic about things, even at my worst times. So I spent quite a while trying to find the right person once I was convinced that, this is probably something I should do. So
that was the route you needed to go. Yeah.
So I sent emails, phone calls. I read everybody's, I don't recommend everybody do this because it's probably not relevant, but I read everybody's qualifications and tried to follow up on everything. And eventually I just basically ended up choosing somebody based on how kind they looked in their picture. It was just it ended up just being a good thing,
good feeling.
All these things check out and that guy looks like somebody I can talk to. And as I said, I was in a position where I could afford to do that. And those first, I've been seeing him for 4 years now. It's long, but those first couple of weeks were a mess. The first couple of weeks going to see him, it was not black and white. It wasn't straightforward. It was, again, that just unloading of everything, just firing your whole history out as a person in all of the complicated routes that it takes, and the difficult job for him to be able to just try and hang on to the few bits of fruit on the journey that he knows can be built into a road to something positive, a road to some sense of...
Like helping you put pieces of a puzzle together.
Of course. And that's what it was like, because I didn't know what was happening in myself. Again, I was able to deal with the panic now, but I wasn't able to deal with the total sense of loss and alienation with the world, and this sense of depression that I was so unequipped for. And that was worked, and it was great. And eventually I was able to control the chemical side, the external chemical side of stuff, and I wasn't drinking the same way.
You do re-engage with the professional supports, and through both talk therapy, through medication, you're able to kind of get enough breathing room just to kind of feel, I suppose, shave some of that numbness away and start to feel again. And I think it's always important to say at this point, when people re-engage with therapy or engage, that there can be that kind of initial release or relief, but then there's like sometimes a second layer of I'm actually in this now, and I've got to try. I understand my puzzle's all messed up, but now I've got to try piece it together. And I'm kind of curious from with the career path you've been on and your music and launching that and that coming out as an album, because in some ways, yes, music became a place for you to kind of pour your creativity into, to both distract yourself, but also process things, to remember things, to piece it together, David. But also then it means from a performance perspective, also you're having to then relive that, if that makes sense. Do you get what I'm coming at? Like, it's not like, hey, like, let's say for me, for example, I've written a book, I put it all together, and kind of it's a printed thing, so it's just like over there. Whereas you're actually going then to reenact it, to talk about it, to say these lyrics that you've created, to listen to music that you've put together. Is that an unusual experience in some ways?
Yeah. It's an unbelievably unusual experience. It's an experience that's very different every time. Sometimes leaves me feeling an unbelievable weight of guilt, sometimes with a great sense of pain, but oftentimes with a great sense of relief and realignment with who I am as a person. I haven't really been able to figure out what it is that dictates how I'm going to feel afterwards, because I don't play an awful lot. And part of the reason why I don't play an awful lot is because I don't think that it's healthy to revisit this sort of stuff again and again with that frequency. I do think it's healthy, for myself at least, to be able to revisit it from time to time.
On your terms?
On my terms. But to be extremely candid about it, I feel like it's very complicated and that there's a few things at play. Beyond the fact that at times it is this great relief and it is this thing that helps me realign where my life is going, or who my sense of self. It is something that helps me realign my sense of self. That's what it is. It does also at times feel like a very necessary penance for myself, just for me. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's healthy for other people, but for me, it is something that works. It is something that makes me feel like I have not just mentally, but very physically confronted the darker parts of the history of my past couple of years. And I have very fundamentally gone through something for an hour that's uncomfortable. It's deeply confrontational. And I feel like it offsets something for me. But then I know I've mentioned it many times, and I think in a lot of ways it can be hard to believe, and I think I find it hard to believe within myself at times. I question myself about this narrative, to be very frank. I think at I think when I break it down, it's extremely accurate, but I naturally question myself in it. I do feel like the real primary urge to perform, to do this thing from time to time, because it is a rare thing, is very much to accommodate a space that allows strangers and at times loved ones to be able to, for an hour, go through a thing and hopefully do it in a safe way. When I say go through a thing, it's a very basic way of looking at it. I know I mentioned earlier how pervasive this life experience is, the reality of living through suicidal ideation, or the reality of living through a life where you've been affected by somebody else's suicide, or maybe just somebody else's tragic death, tragic loss. I think the show is created, at least now, in a way that gives people a space to let out some of that primal rage and terror and fear, then to be able to allow them to feel some sense of hope, and within that hope release some of that sadness that's there, release some of that depression that's there, and hopefully leave feeling somewhat inspired with inspired in the sense that things are moving forward down a path that is bright and getting brighter. I didn't know I would feel that way about things until I started to play some shows, and I would get the messages afterwards, or I would stay after the show, which is something that I did for all of my first shows. I just stayed afterwards. I just talked to people. People would just come up, and it would be, my very first show I played was in Glasgow. It was like men in their 40s and 50s, like fucking big, rugged, looked like miners, you know what I mean? And they're coming up bawling their eyes out and saying, like, listen, I lost my son to suicide, and this has given me a path here. That has offset. That is something that's so, I just get, like today, checking my messages today, there's like 6 or 7 of those, just that exact narrative, you know? That offsets, it just offsets that, it offsets that sense of guilt in many ways, reaffirms in a lot of ways the very real responsibility around this kind of topic, because it's not something I take lightly, particularly because this was not really supposed to be, in its first iteration, not something that was really supposed to be shared amongst the world, you know. That took a bit of convincing. It really helps offset that feeling of guilt, and at times that feeling of despair for the world. But I'd be lying if I didn't say it wasn't at times also a burden, because it's an incredibly difficult weight to take. It's really hard to read those messages. It's really difficult to, like, the odd time you go out and you're around your friends and everybody's juiced and you're not having a drink, and a stranger rocks up because you're in Dublin and says, like, listen, man, and gives you, you know, gives you their own story, and how that record or how those performances has in some way helped. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, but Jesus Christ, it's hard. And again, another thing that I wouldn't be able to deal with safely on a day-to-day, or know how to respond to, if I didn't have what I have learned in therapy over the course of the past 4 years, because that's been so much wider now, and such a wider net of what I've learned within that space.
Yeah, because, like, obviously David is someone who is, whether you like it or not, now, like, public facing, you know, because I just want to touch upon the point you've just made of people through no fault of their own, and it's obviously brilliant that they're connecting with what you're putting out or what your output is. But there's just a human nature of when someone shares something publicly that it's all, people almost presume that it's been compartmentalizing in the past, and that obviously, and someone sharing their weight with you, their pain with you, is a blessing too, as you've kind of alluded to. But also, I think it's important to say then that the individual still has their own well-being, that you still have your own well-being on a day-to-day basis. You've got to live your life, and that's why I always say, because we actually had a similar conversation with Rory O'Connor, who was on an earlier episode of this podcast too, David, and just that same thing of, if you are a person, I suppose, that finds themselves after a few beers or on a night out where like that emotions or those feelings are spilling out at that point, that's normally a good sign, a good warning signal that you would benefit, and it could be time to go talk to someone like you've talked about for like over the course of this conversation, professionally, in terms of unpacking that in your own time in a safe space and trying to get a grip on that. And it's a hard one. Like, it's a good and a bad thing in those situations, and I do just kind of want to touch upon that, because it's just a good warning signal. If you find yourself, it's happened to me on nights out, I've done it to other people, when it's that kind of spill and that overflow, it's a good sign of, hey, is there somewhere I can reach out to? Is there someone I can talk to? Is there a body of work here I need to kickstart? And
there's a nice way to put it when you said a body of work to kickstart. I never really thought about it like that. It's just a really nice phrase. It explains it well.
Because it's a body of work that you've touched upon it there too. Like, it never really ends. Like, you think you figured out one thing, and then it's, because I know that now, I never thought of that, so now I'm thinking of that. How am I going to unpack that? And I suppose what I was thinking there as you've been talking, David, and as we kind of wrap up, like, in some ways, I'm thinking you in your shed, kind of in that darkness, and pouring your, like, whatever energy you could muster, or putting your whatever focus you could muster into the record, into For Those I Love. And then in some ways, it's just kind of it's easy for me to say from the outsider, but I'll share it with you. Like, there's kind of a beauty then that you performing that is magnifying that space out for other people to touch base with the feelings, with the emotions, the memory, the pain they're carrying. And I know, like, you're fresh off the back of just playing Electric Picnic, pretty recently from when we were talking. I suppose I'll ask you that one before I kind of wrap up, because that must have been a crazy experience to stand. I know my little brother Billy, who we grew up with, he was at it, and he said the whole thing, it blew him away. But for you as an individual, primarily, mentally, emotionally, physically, to stand on a stage like that, an Electric Picnic, and perform and put yourself out there like that, how was that as an experience for you?
It was very different to all of the other live experiences I've had. I traditionally, that was only like, whatever, it's a tour. I think I counted yesterday. As I said, I don't play many shows, very selective. It was the 13th time I've played live, I think. And I had never gotten anxious before a show before. But I get incredibly anxious after I play. So whenever I like play and then I talk to people and I go home, I become overwhelmed with anxiety. And that anxiety, I think, is to do with a sense of responsibility, because I start to think again, did everybody leave feeling okay? Was that the right thing to do?
Is there a fear, like you feel like you're going in ripping off a Band-Aid almost?
Yeah. I've talked to another performer who is known for very emotional shows about another Donna Mead person, without outline exact names. They kind of put me at ease with it in a lot of ways. You know, they spoke to me a little bit about what way to orchestrate a show to make sure that people do get to go through that, and how they can leave a little bit more lighter than they came in, and how they can feel that sense of safety when they're there, and togetherness. But that's what I feel usually after a show. I just start to doubt that, and I go through it all. But with Electric Picnic, I don't know. I had, for the first time in a while, had a very bad week leading up to it. It was just a lot happened, and there was a lot going on, some loss and I usually almost welcome stress, but there was just too much. It was just an incredibly emotionally and physically overwhelming week. And I had redlined myself, I think, before I had even gotten to the show. And then suddenly, leading into the day of the show, having been so tired, so physically exhausted and just so emotionally drained already, which is something I really don't ever want to happen. I try to preserve myself beforehand because I know it's going to be a very difficult night afterwards. I felt anxious all day, and it was a brand new experience for me. I felt my stomach was all over the place, like call a spade a spade. I was in the jacks every 2 minutes, like, and I just thought it just doesn't happen to me. And I didn't know what it was, but I think upon reflection, a lot of it was, there was such a different, for me anyway, such a different sense of responsibility rolling into something on the Saturday night of a festival, knowing that people are coming into that space sometimes as strangers to the project, as strangers to the music, not knowing what it is. It's not like, the big Olympia show or something where everybody's going to that place just to see you. They know what they're signing up for. This is different. This is different. And I think I was fearful of this great role of responsibility here, where you know that you aren't there to provide the light-hearted entertainment. You're not there to provide the great time. You're there to provide a place for people to confront, to confront their past, their present, their future, and to try and grow within that hour, to try and shake something off. And it had been put to me like that all week, and I'd been getting those messages. Oh man, I need this. And I just felt such a different difficulty. And I think I took that show so seriously because I knew that was the case. Because I knew I wasn't rolling into something where people are coming in after 2 beers on a Wednesday night. This is a Saturday night after they've been there for 48 hours. And I've worked at Electric Picnic 6 years filming. Like, it gets heavy, I know what it's like. And I just really wanted to make sure that people were okay. And let me be very clear as well, not to overlook the selfishness in myself. I wanted to make sure I was okay as well. I didn't know what I was going to. One of my best friends was getting married first thing the next morning, and I knew this isn't the usual finish up at a show and then come home and spend time to unlock all of that chaos that's still bubbling away inside you, and then place it out in a neat way that you can understand it. This was roll out of that, get back to Dublin, sleep for 3 hours, and then get straight down first thing to a wedding down in a different part of Ireland. I knew that I was facing I knew that I wasn't facing the usual decompartmentalise that I have after a show. I couldn't do my usual routine. So I felt that sense of responsibility for other people, and I also, maybe for the first time in a while when it comes to a show, I don't know, felt a deeper sense of responsibility for myself as well. I didn't know how I felt about the show for a couple of days afterwards, and I think, like what I mentioned earlier, receiving those messages from strangers, from people that I'd never met, telling me what happened to them for the course of that hour, what they went through for the course of that hour, what it has done for them in the days since, or what it had meant to their friends. That was a greater team that came out. It's just all these people saying, man, me and my friends had gone through such and such a thing. We were all there. Again, it just offsets it. It just offsets those feelings of fear, those feelings of guilt, and makes you feel like you've accommodated something for a community in that need that space. Because I know I needed that many times. I know I've gone to see Damo Dempsey because I need to undo something in myself. I need that hour to feel that rage, to feel that sense of terror about the world, to feel that, you know, unbearable sadness and pain, and then to feel that, you know, feeling of hope and that feeling of reality and that feeling of future. I think I feel, not yet, but maybe almost at peace with last week since then. It was strange. It was different. It's very different to playing to like a European crowd or something. It's just so, that it's just, again, I just keep talking about that sense of responsibility. It's just different. It's just different. Seeing yourself in somebody, that common ground between us. It's just different. It was a strange experience. It's a strange experience.
No, I totally hear you, and I think, look, as I just kind of sign off on this, David, I was kind of share what's on my brain at the minute is, one, like, first of all, thank you for sharing everything you have over the course of this conversation, the honesty, the insight, the vulnerability, the courage. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to help so many people, and I suppose as I've just listened to you there talking about both your own well-being, David, and then the responsibility of other people, it's just such a timely reminder as we wrap this up for one of the most important things we can all do for ourselves is look after ourselves first and foremost, and prioritize our own well-being, because when we do, it helps us be better friends, brothers, sons, daughters, girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, fathers, mothers. When we look after ourselves first, we can kind of help look out for other people. And the fact that you're able to perform and create spaces for people ultimately to feel their feelings, good or bad, and to connect and engage with something. And I think what I'm thinking of here, and I know I'm rambling on a little bit, but we all have so many thoughts every day, and we all feel so many different things. And one of the biggest things we can do is just the actions we take out of that is to connect with someone you care about, with someone nearby. If it is a professional service that helps you look after yourself, helps you look after other people. And that's really how I'd like to sign off on, just that. Those thoughts and feelings will happen to us all, good and bad, and we have some sense of control. Not always, it's really hard, but we do have some sense of control over the actions we can take. Some are helpful, some aren't. And we're all on that path. And I just want to thank you again so much for sharing those lessons, for sharing your experiences, your insights. And I just thank you for being part of this campaign, because I know this conversation is going to just touch so many people, and just to get to talk to it about this stuff with someone who I grew up with. It's just been a really unique experience. I'm very grateful for it, and thank you, David.
Of course, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Real Talks with SOSAD Ireland Wellbeing series. This conversation with David Balfe, also known as For Those I Love, was extremely powerful and insightful. I'm very grateful for David for sharing his mental health journey with us, and I've no doubt his story will help our listeners. Over on the Real Talks with SOSAD Ireland Wellbeing Hub, I've already shared mental skills masterclasses on self-awareness, resilience and self-compassion. And I've posted an in-depth conversation with Rory O'Connor, who's more commonly known as Rory's Stories. To get all previous episodes, go to sosadireland.ie/Real Talks, or search for Real Talks on whatever podcast platform you prefer. This podcast was hosted and produced by me, Alan O'Mara. Audio was mixed and edited by Jack Deacon at Plural Video and Design. And the music is an original track called Everyone's Alright by harpist Mary Kate Boylan. Thanks for listening.